Ariel Dorfman was born in Buenos Aires on May 6, 1942, the son of Adolf Dorfman, who was born in Odessa, Ukraine, and became a prominent Argentine professor of economics and the author of Historia de la Industria Argentina, and Fanny Zelovich Dorfman, whose roots were Romanian Moldovan Jews. Shortly after his birth, they moved to the United States and then, in 1954, moved to Chile. He attended and later worked as a professor at the University of Chile, marrying Angelica Milanarich in 1966 and becoming a Chilean citizen in 1967. From 1968 to 1969, he attended graduate school at the University of California at Berkeley and then returned to Chile. From 1970 to 1973, Dorfman served as a cultural advisor to President Salvador Allende. During this time, he wrote, with Armand Matellart, a critique of North American cultural imperialism. How to read Donald Duck. Dorfman was supposed to do the night shift at the La Moneda presidential palace the night before the Pinochet coup, but he had unknowingly swapped his shift with a friend, Claudio Gimenio. The military dictator of Chile was an authoritarian military government that ruled Chile between 1973 and 1990. This dictatorship was established after the democratically elected government, Salvador Allende, was overthrown by a CIA-backed coup on the 11th of September 1973. This dictatorship was headed by a military junta president by General Augusto Pinochet, and hence called the Pinochet regime. The regime was characterized by the systematic suppression of political parties and over the persecution of dissidents to an extent that was unprecedented in the history of Chile. Overall, the regime left over 3,000 dead or missing, tortured thousands of prisoners, and forced 200,000 Chileans into exile 2 years after its ascension, and implemented radical neoliberal economic reforms in the sharp contrast to Allende's leftist policies, advised by a team of free market economics educated in American universities known as the Chicago Boys. The Chicago Boys were a group of Chilean economists prominent around the 1970s and 80s, the majority who trained at the Department of Economics in the University of Chicago under Milton Friedman. Upon their return to Latin America, they adopted positions in numerous South American governments as economic advisors, many of them reaching high positions. They are credited with transforming Chile into Latin America's best-performing economy and one of the world's best business climates. Some have argued that these policies were deliberately intended to serve the interests of American corporations at the expense of the Latin American populations.
You know, people come up to me all the time and they say, you can't be the person who's written all these things, who has had 4 generations of exile, his grandfather, his father, yourself, and your children, and you can't be the person who's seen terrors and has survived coups and has changed more countries than other people change their shoes or their neckties. You can't be somebody who has survived death and who's gone back to his country and been betrayed. You can't be that person. You can't be so full of joy and so full of hope. And the truth is, yes, I can be. And I can be, I think, fundamentally. Because I had a moment in time, I lived through a revolution of absolute hope and absolute joy. Everybody was changing the world and changing themselves. And there's just nothing like it. To watch illiterate peasants feel that they can be the owners of the land, to watch workers feel that they can be the owners of the factory where they work, to watch intellectuals like myself feel that they can be the owners of the imagination and of the mass media and of the whole country air and of the words, there's just nothing like it. And then the dream was crushed. One day, there was 1 million of us marching down the Alamedas of history, and the next day, we were running for our lives, and many of those people were killed. They were exiled, they were disappeared, they were tortured. And I went into exile. And if the country was crushed and democracy was crushed, well, I was super crushed. I felt as if I was just being torn apart. And for me, the main problem as a writer was that I became silent. I lost my voice. I didn't know what to say because the words that I had said, the dream I had, seemed to have been destroyed. It seemed to have led not to joy and brotherhood and friendship and solidarity, but to the destruction of everything. to death. And so I had to find a way of speaking about that dream and to keep that hope alive without lying about it at all. I had to learn the lessons. I had to learn that there were mistakes that we made during that revolution and yet not say goodbye to the desire for that revolution itself. I had to find out that one needs to be cautious and prudent. One needs to compromise. One needs to be careful. One needs not to dream as a wild man would, but to dream in the rationality of reality. And I had to learn that, and I had to learn at the same time not to throw the whole dream out, not to become conservative, not to betray the people who had dreamt that with me. I needed that. And I'm not sure, but it took me a long time. It took me many, many years to write this book. This book is a story of how I kept on dreaming. And yet at the same time, I learned many lessons. So that dream, the next time that it comes up, and it keeps on coming up, would be a better dream, would be a dream that would be within the confines of what can really be possible. And yet I continue to think that everything is possible. You just have to learn. You have to learn many things.